excited. So,
Yeah, we're appreciative that you asked us. Thank you, Vicki.
oh, I think it's going to be a great show, and I'm very excited. I just want to look at so I don't miss anything that we plan to talk about. So I try to. It's such a rough draft.
Bill will remind you.
Yeah, good. Yep. Yep. Okay. Okay. So why don't we, if and we're all check and wait to see if you all are ready.
Facebook said they're ready when you're ready.
Oh, good. Okay, and you're ready, right? I know.
Who are you referring to?
No, to you, Richard.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Facebook's ready.
Right. Okay, and you all are ready. Okay, so we're ready to start. So
okay, flip the silver switch that turns the timer on. Is the light on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, put the clapper in front of your face. When you hit the clapper, you're on the air.
Welcome to Talking Peace, being recorded here at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future, which is also the home of our wonderful producer, Richard Wicca. Thanks, Richard. And also we are we're broadcasting on WBNY. That's Buff State's original alternative radio station, or it's Buffalo's original alternative radio station that is the radio station of our friends at Buff State. And we are here on Haudenosaunee land, so it just reminds me that we are on their land, that we are grateful for this land, for the whole creation, for Mother Earth and all of the different elements, plants and animals and everything that are, so none of whom do some of the crazy things that we do, that we have to learn from and recover from and stop doing. So on that note, I'm very excited about our wonderful guests. And speaking of Buff State, I would just say very, very much related to Buff State. The Anne Frank Project will be highly featured because today we're actually remembering, as part of the Holocaust Remembrance Day, that is officially tomorrow, I believe, Holocaust Remembrance Day, although we can remember every day the madness and the terror of that time and of the lessons to be learned. Why never again? So I want to say I'm very, very, very thrilled and honored to have here Sophia. Hi, Sophia.
Hi, good to see you again.
It's great to see you again. I'm so glad you didn't have to come out in the cold. So we have these technology capabilities so that we're all here together at the same time. So Sophia, as a Holocaust survivor yourself, your story is so important. And we have with Sophia and with us all here, Drew Kahn. Drew is the SUNY Distinguished Service Professor, as well as the founding director of the Anne Frank Project, housed in our very own Buff State. So, Drew, welcome.
Thank you for having me, and we really, on behalf of all of Buff State, we really appreciate the invitation. Thank you so much.
We're so grateful that you were able to make it, especially at this busy time of year, and which is always a busy time of year, but especially now. And I am so grateful to have our dear friend Jess Kent here right with us. Hi, Jess.
Hi, how is everyone tonight?
It's great having you here. I know you have such a wealth of experience, both from the, now I want to be sure I get the names right of the NewGround Muslim-Jewish partnership that I think is so interesting and exciting, and also you're being co-leader of the Sisterhood of Salaam Shalom, which again, these are things, they're all efforts for us to find a new way, and I'm so excited of what you have to bring to this conversation as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here with Sophia and Drew. They're the highlight and the headliners. I'm just here as a support staff.
Oh, we're all working to make another way as possible in this world, and so that's why we're here studying on and remembering the insanity, the atrocity, and the horror, so that we remember how to not have it happen again. So before we go any further, I want to just say, when we want to just as a little nice way to start, a lot of times we like to think about our values and the values that we're bringing into this conversation. So so I want to invite you, Sophia, to just say, a value or two that you think is so prominent in this conversation, remembering the Holocaust.
Jews never forget.
Mm-hmm.
They never forget, and we should not forget.
And we should not forget. Mm-hmm.
I was just reading again, and you read about the Armenian genocide after the First World War. If you ask somebody, did you ever hear about the Armenian genocide? And even teachers, no, I never heard about it, because that whole generation died out, and we didn't hear about it.
Oh, boy.
Jews, they will talk about the Holocaust, for 5,000 more years, right?
We hope.
Right.
No, we do.
Right.
And the generation is taking over.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Exactly. So that's such an important value, that never forgetting and bringing those lessons from the past, bringing them here now when we need them now too. So Drew, what's some value or two that you want us to remember as we're remembering?
Thanks for the question, Vicki. I think it's really important. It's one of the things we talk about with the Anne Frank Project quite a bit. And for those who don't know, we use stories as our platform for everything we do. Mm-hmm. And I'll share with you as the value that I'd like to bring into the conversation, a value that we bring into classroom auditoriums and cafeterias and refugee camps all over the world. We like to look into those kids' eyes, just like I'm looking into the eyes of the camera right now and saying, you matter, and your stories. And we are here to help you tell your stories, because if you don't tell your story, somebody else will, and they're going to get it wrong. Right. And if you think of that on the personal level, it certainly reverberates universally. But if you look at all of our world's problems, many of them can be directly attributed to somebody or some nation or some area of control that shifted a narrative away from the truth to benefit themselves. So on days like today, and all throughout the month of February, when we're remembering all of those great Black and brown heroes in our world, that is really important that we tell our own stories, and that we are providing young people with those tools to tell their stories. So the truth can be heard, not a convenient narrative. So I guess if I had to put it into one sentence, you matter, and your stories matter.
Thank you. That is wonderful. Very beautiful. And Jess, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the values that come most boldly to mind are the values of curiosity and responsibility. As we train kids and we teach teachers and we build community, we're cultivating a sense of curiosity and wonder. Not only what are the stories, but what are the stories that we don't know? What are the details that we haven't asked? And I think in the realm of an oral history project or in a cultural knowledge project in our community, it's really important to hold the curiosity value dear. And at the end of the day, that curiosity and that learning enables us to be responsible to ourselves, to be responsible to the people who we care about, to be responsible responsible to the people who we don't know and we are sharing this earth with, right? There are so many intersectional identities that each of us holds dear to. And feeling responsible as an agent of change and an agent to improve the world around us for ourselves, for our children, for our neighbors. I think that that's another value that I'm holding dear today in this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for both of those. They are just so important and a little surprising. Curiosity, that's a wonderful one. And of course, responsibility. And they are related in a funny sort of a way to truth and love. So that curiosity is really, or hearing people's stories, that truth of their story, the truth of the experience that they've had, and that they can share with us. And then that responsibility or that mattering, that's about love, and that never forgetting, that's about love. That's about we are all here together and we're all connected so that if we really love each other, we can't keep hurting each other, because when we hurt each other, we hurt ourselves. So anyway, so we're very grateful for all those values and those reminders. So as we're remembering on this day of remembrance, I want to ask you, Sophia, if you would tell your story of how you survived the Holocaust, your story of surviving.
Well,
It's a very long, big, huge request, but just a little bit of what you want to tell of your story.
that's that you don't expect that answer.
Oh, okay.
I was and my parents were rather well-to-do, to put it mildly, because everything, and money helped me through the Holocaust. If you were poor, there were no exits anymore. They put you on a cattle train, and the moment you landed in Poland, you were cremated the same day. So money mattered a lot, an awful. It also mattered the country you lived in,
Right.
For example, I always say every genocide and every Holocaust and things like that, you need the victims, you need the perpetrators, the bystanders, and upstanders. And during the war, most of them were not upstanders. Most of them were in the world, including the Pope, including Roosevelt and Churchill. They were the bystanders. They knew about it from day one.
Right.
So the perpetrators are not the worst people, it is the bystanders. And almost everybody was a bystander in this world, and very few were the upstanders. So right now, we're talking about the Holocaust, and I go to school and we tell stories, and Frank, you have to tell, not the older generation, they don't listen, the younger generation, what they do to repair the world. And I'm not so prejudiced. They're not as prejudiced as the older generation, not at all.
Right.
And so I'm very optimistic. They always say to me, you're such a bad time. How come you're always so optimistic? I am, because I only work with the younger generation, and they're great. They're not prejudiced, and they don't do the talk. They also do they do a lot of volunteer work.
Wow.
And I always, if everybody was like you, this generation I'm talking to, we will have a peaceful world.
Well, that's what we're working on. Go ahead, Drew. What were you going to say?
It's important to realize who we're in front of right now. With Sophia. Sophia's unique in lots of ways. I mean, she's a dear friend. I'm very fortunate to call her my friend, and she's one of the founding board members of the There would be no Anne Frank project without Sophia.
Right.
But one of the things I've learned from Sophia that is different, because I've been honored to be in front of many genocide survivors. Growing up as a young Jewish boy in Los Angeles, I was fortunate to be in front of regularly in Hebrew school and all of them and all of those things and the camps and the things we went to. Sophia's different. So Sophia's different in the sense that she immediately connects her experience to Rwanda, to Bosnia, to Cambodia, to America, right? To all of those places which are experiencing prejudice, dissonance, intolerance, racism. Sophia makes an incredible defined line for young people from her experiences, which of course are horrific and horrifying and inhuman. But for some unique reason, so Sophia is able to process all of it and make it work for all of us, right? And she has every right to not do that. She has every right to say, my experience was horrible. I have no trust in people anymore, and I want to go home, right? Sophia's processing has taught me so much about like it's not surprising to me that Sophia didn't just immediately answer your question to talk about her experience. She,
Right.
the kids want to hear about the concentration camp, right? The kids want to hear not because they're happy about it, but they want to hear the direct experience, right? They want to hear that person in front of them was there. But Sophia always manages to connect her unbelievable personal experience that she was in the midst of to make sure that it makes sense to everybody and to the world, which is very unique. I've met lots of survivors from lots of different genocides, and as you know, I spent a lot of time in Rwanda.
Right.
It's very rare for a genocide survivor to have that instinct. So I just wanted to say that because it is such a gift to know Sophia, but to have that wisdom in front of us is such an honor.
Well, I think so much of it is because you're such an upstander, Sophia, as you tell other people to be, because you know how much it is about standing up for what's right. And when people are treated unjustly or, anywhere in the world that we, if we are upstanders, we do not take that lying down. We don't feel disconnected from that. We try to do, we need to do and feel, that connection to everyone, to everyone's story and to how it can be different. So I would just add that my dad was also a Holocaust survivor, but he left as a 15-year-old in Germany when he was told in 1933 that he was such a radical. He was told that if he didn't leave, they were going to take care of him. So as a 15-year-old, he went to Israel, then Palestine. He was on a kibbutz for a while, and then he ended up joining the British police and then the British Army. Changed his name to Ross from Rosenbaum because he was afraid, if the Germans caught him, that I don't know what he thought they'd think about his German accent. But anyway, but my father, so when people carry it with, it's back to what you said about people's stories. So we take our stories and they make us who we are. So, and that view, that compassion that you have to worry about all of the people and all of the stories that could happen if people are bystanders rather than upstanders, is that compassion, is that love, really, that makes you do, and still, as the, how many years young you are, still doing it and still helping us realize that.
Also, just telling a story is not, when you talk to an audience, especially younger audience.
Sure, right.
Give them the tools to be an upstander and not
Right.
a bystander. Well, they say, what can I do? I'm only 14, 15, 16 years old. What And I do, I'm not famous, blah, 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 blah. I said, you can do it. One person can do it. It can change the community or the world. And I give them the example for Rosa Parks, who didn't want to give up a seat in the bus. And don't tell me, well, big deal. She didn't want to give up her seat in the bus. But in those years, it was probably they would have killed her. You know what I mean?
Right.
But she didn't give up. So one person can make a difference.
Right.
So when you have audiences and we tell stories, give them the tools, because especially the younger generation, they want, they really want to do something. And then we tell them how they can do that. Tell them
Right.
how they do it, because they do a lot of volunteer work. Don't
Right.
you think so? I have great faith in this whole younger generation.
You know, Vicki and Jess, that Sophia was a teacher, so
Right.
that was her preference. And you can and those tools come out of her naturally. I would next time that we go to a school, and it will those visits will start coming up. I'm going to put her to work. I can't remember a time when we were in front of a group of students, at whether it's a high school or a middle school, elementary school, where they weren't aware of those tools that Sophia was subconsciously laying out like breadcrumbs to make connections to today. Because what Sophia does is she opens up the playbook of intolerance that is copied and repeated over and over and over again. And in this time that our young people are living, which is a time of perhaps unheard of division, right? Unheard social reckoning, right? We're at this peak of oppression, of this oppressive time, where our students are trying to figure out where do they belong. And wow, that happened then, but that sounds pretty familiar. She doesn't connect the dots with, she puts the dots out, and it's a bit of magic to watch them quickly within an assembly put those dots together and say, that sounds familiar.
Right.
And what can I do about it to make sure it doesn't happen again? Which is why we said to you, Vicki, when I was talking to you last night, of course we'll be there. I think we always say this is the most important time to remember, right? Every year we say that, don't we, Jess?
Right.
We say this is the most important, but I think this year when we're all trying to tiptoe out of our caves and of COVID and the social reckoning, that we really, when we're coming out and starting to see the light, that we are so desperate for tools.
Right.
Tools to put our broken lives, our broken stories back together. So people like Sophia are essential, because she so cleverly does what so much of us need to do, which is laying out the dots for the young people to put together again.
Right.
Which is,
I don't think that she's her story, which you can find online, you can talk to her directly.
Sure.
I mean, Sophia is such a wealth of information and storytelling and fact finding, but really the values and the moral of the story, right, is to have this collective consciousness, to have this communal awareness, and to be called to action, to not only witness the atrocities that happen in the world, but to do something about it, to do something that's small yet significant. And I think that calling to action for both young people and young at heart folks, right, is so important. We have to be having these conversations. What's important? What are we going to remember? How are we going to morph the communities around us? What is our legacy going to be? And young people have legacies, right? And I think that a lot of Sophia's story, from soup to nuts, right, from the very beginning to now, has these themes of not just inspiration, but motivation, calling people in, asking people to stand up, to rise up, to do something instead of just cower or consider, really to motivate and to move.
can you believe you do all that?
Oh, of course. You know you do. Yeah, absolutely you do. And you're so right about what's in our young people today and in people. You know, it's just if we, you know, can help, you know, to nurture and cultivate those skills and those tools and that that inspiration. I know one thing we sometimes do whenever we're doing a group for kids or adults for that matter, and have a peace agreement, and then sometimes they'll come up with their own things, and they're always right on the mark. They don't miss. They know what to do. They know what we need to do what we need to do. So they'll lay them all out. And then one time we took it and we started talking about peace tools. And sure enough, and I didn't figure this out in advance or something. So of course, everything that came on the peace agreement, like listening, respecting, caring for each other, share the air, or be responsible, or whatever they said. All those things were peace tools. They were all, and that active, that active caring and participation is alive in young people. And that's, I've been privileged to go to the Buff State Social Justice Conference that you have every I think it's virtually and it was virtual the past couple of years. But anyway, we'll get back to in person. But to hear Sophia, and see Sophia working with and meeting, and then informally talking with the students who were there, the Buff State students and the other people, community members who came, has just been always so exciting and truly memorable, and truly just so life affirming and hopeful.
Vicki, we've done 13 of those festivals, and thanks for mentioning. Really proud of them, and it's part of it's emblematic of Buffalo State's commitment to social justice. I mean,
Right.
That's really important.
Right.
Important to President Conway Turner. We learned about 2 years after our first of 13 festivals we've done now that after Sophia talks, we need to get her a comfy chair,
Right.
and a rug,
Mm-hmm.
to a table, and coffee and cookies, and then because the students do it automatically, they line up,
Right.
even if they didn't have, because she has brought such comfort, she has brought such a sense of order, and that I think is the most. When I say story, I'm talking not a play, not a novel.
No.
I'm talking
Right.
life's trajectory, right? So to me, the most important thing that stories do, and we're wired for this. Stories bring order to chaos.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So what's it does, because people hear the Holocaust and right, their brains and our hearts are going crazy, right? We're shattered. Can't believe it. We've heard horrible things. I read the diary. I've seen movies. And then Sophia comes and brings some order to them, and they just want to come. Sometimes they will stand in line and not even say anything. They just want to be next to her.
I don't want to lecture. I want to use the word. I want to have a dialogue with my audience.
Right.
It is not say something. I want to hear from them.
Right.
And I learn a lot from them, a lot. So I call it a dialogue, not a lecture.
Right.
And I learn.
And I think what you're talking about, Sophia, is really adding capacity and skill building to people's toolbox, right? And it's not just about what we're listening to, but it's what it enables us to do. And I think one of the best parts about Sophia's story and the agency that she has to share it with so many different people and so many different age groups and people, of all walks of life, is that we're able to see ourselves in her. We're able to see her in us. There's this kind of reckoning, or there's a kind of commonality that binds us. And then we're asked, if we were in these situations, what would we do, right? When we see injustice in today's world, what should we do? And there's a very different approach to give someone a hammer versus to teach someone how to utilize it, right? And I think that what Sophia's story and the time that she shared with so many people over the years is that it doesn't just give us a hammer, to fix something, but she allows us to conceptualize and to identify, how can we fix something? What is it that we're trying to contribute to? And that is a powerful difference between being identified or being told that there's an issue and being able to see it and activate the solution for ourselves.
Well,
It is very important. I don't really tell my story, but then they always ask me, how did you handle it when the whole thing was over, the war and everything else? But
right.
were you anxious? Did you want to take revenge and things like that? But I always tell them what I did after the war, and that's more important what happened to me during the war.
Right.
And I tell them what a good life I have. I'm not talking about money, I have a good life, I have a nice family, things I want to, etc., etc. And I made my own life. But the moment the war was over, I said, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And I did all the things I wanted to do. So I tell them the stories what I did after the war, because that's what they need too.
Sure.
Once they have problems in life, what can you do? There are a million things you can do, and you don't need money for that and things. So I love to talk about after the war, because everybody do something, and we don't have to sit down and say, oh my God, my poor me. You can do something, and you are the one who know yourself better than anybody else. So you use, quote unquote, you tell them.
To me, it's like being the change. So first of all, by telling your life after the war, but also by what you're doing at that very time, is being the change that we want to see, that listening, that dialogue, that caring about each other, that truth and love, really, that we just started out with, and the not forgetting, but also not forgetting also all those values that we just talked about, and how we can change, and how that having agency, having, that will to do something and to do it for other people, and to help each other really, and to be that upstander, to not just let things go by, is so critical. It is making me think too of one other thing, which is, I know somebody once said, spirituality cannot be taught, it must be caught. Well, I think it's that same agency, and that positive determination, that you have, is the same way. It can be caught. It's really infectious.
And Vicki, as we've talked about the amazing radars of young people, right? Children are the royalty of our universe, and should be respected. That you don't need to tell them to walk the walk. They see it, and the reason that they're inspired to walk the walk is because Sophia walks the walk.
Right.
She came from unspeakable depths and says, move on, do your job now. Because you survived is to do the work of tikkun olam, right, to repair the world. So she doesn't need to say walk the walk, because they're very attuned to seeing he is doing what she's talking about.
Right.
They're very clever. Students, young people can spot imposters from a mile away.
Right.
Blah 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 blah. Right. That's why we work so hard in the physical kinesthetic making of stories, because the making of stories is an act of activism. It's a place to put it. So we're not just talking up and moving, right? And this is an amazing time. Vicki, you and I were talking a little bit about this last night. It's an amazing time to be an educator, because what we used to call acceptable Western education in many ways simply is not acceptable. The students are not finding value in what's happening in the classroom. And 50 years ago, that was true as well. But it's great to see uncomfortable, right? But it's great to see that all these changes that are happening. And if I had to put the most successful changes that I've witnessed, K through 12, higher education, all the way through grad school, in one state, it's that students are craving the kinesthetic response to content. They want to do.
Right.
And they don't need to sit, because life's not about sitting for them. They want to do.
You know, I want to ask you, Jess, because I know you do a lot of training for people, you know, in conflict resolution and educational programs to help people understand, you know, some of those ways of listening and then doing to make those changes, to be those changes. And I do want to mention that being the change, that's something Gandhi said, you know, be the change that you want to see in the world. That this is really what we're talking about, and this is what the youth are instinctively already knowing, because they're trying to do and be that change. Jess, what are some of the ways that you've seen people do that, and that you've seen Sophia do it, or that you try to help people learn to do when they're working in these areas?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Vicki. I mean, there's so many different aspects of it, and there's so many different skill sets that people can bring to the table. And at the end of the day, everyone has conflict, but the differentiation is if we can handle it, right? Can we sit with the uncomfortable feeling? Can we get comfortable with discomfort? And can we commit ourselves to conversations that push our boundaries and our limits so that we can learn more, so that we can expand our minds and be able to see the world, not just from somebody else's shoes, but empathize with their experience. And I always say feelings are facts. You know, we look at history and we look at these stories and we look at these experiences from a textbook way, from an analysis of facts, but there are feelings that are just as important. And a lot of the conflict resolution work that I do stems from that feeling, the identification of feelings, going back to that psychological circle wheel of feelings that so many talented social workers and shrinks use and therapists use on a daily basis to help people get in tune with themselves, get in tune with what is happening around them, and essentially make a plan. And I think that accountability is important. You know, a lot of these issues that we're talking about, small conflict, big conflict, huge international disputes or family disputes, they really can't be countered unless we have an action plan, unless we're keeping ourselves accountable to doing something differently, to thinking about something differently, saying something differently. And it takes a certain amount of vulnerability and humility, but all of these conflict resolution etiquettes or trainings really stem from people's willingness to try. And I think that you can talk about big negotiations, you can talk about international disputes, but at the end of the day, every single person is experiencing some feelings, and our analysis of that, our understanding and comprehension of our world inside helps us to make sense of the world outside. And I think for me, that's a big building block. When we're talking about training high school students or working with women across cross-cultural lines, you know, we're thinking about what we know about the world and our DKDKs, which we would call them. What we don't know, right? We don't even know what we don't know until someone else from the outside reminds us of something else. And we're able to expand our knowledge so that our DKDK grouping becomes smaller. And each of our knowledge in the world on a meta scale, right? But also on an individual scale is important, but the collective memory, the communal consciousness, and our ability to move past, to move on to after the war is just as important. And it allows us to navigate through the war, whether it's internal, interpersonal, or collective, I think is really important. And so much of what Sophia's experienced and so much of what Drew is teaching is important, not just to hear about, but to synthesize and to swallow, right? And I think a lot of times education goes in one ear and out the other, but with this experience, we're asking people to activate, to do something, to make an action plan so that their anti-bullying efforts right now happen, that the schools are safe spaces, that neighbors allow each other to make mistakes and apologize, that family dynamics shift, that institutional knowledge changes. I mean, there's so much there that you can bridge off of. And I think at the end of the day, the conflict resolution starts with our own ability to identify feelings, to communicate with one another, and essentially what I would like to call draft talk, right? So much of our thoughts we don't have thought through until we think them aloud and share them with other people and then say, Drew, does that make sense? Right? Sophia, did I miss anything? And I think that understanding is ultimately what's going to help the next generation and our future generations and the youth of today make progress in a way that we haven't seen yet before. I, like Sophia, am very inspired and excited.
You know, what you're saying, it makes me think of actually Cornel West says, you know, that what we need is moral integrity and universal solidarity. And I think, you know, in you know, that is very much what you're talking about, because both those things will bring us to that way of having to have a new way of doing things. Moral integrity and universal solidarity. And so that's the never again. You know, so if we've seen or we've experienced or we've studied, you know, and heard these stories of such you know, either heinous acts and unfairness, or I mean even, you know, genocide, untold brutality, then we know the universal solidarity. And then with that moral integrity, that means that being responsible, that being an upstander, that we can go from there. What do you?
Yeah, and I think that what you were saying in the very beginning, Vicki, is so true. You know, this day of remembrance is really the days of remembrance, and taking this holiday or this, you know, important memory and sprinkling a little bit of it throughout the year, right? What would it mean if Yom HaShoah and the Day of Remembrance about the Holocaust affected us and was top of mind every day of our year? In little ways, in small yet significant ways, our world would be a very different place. And by putting an entire genocide, an entire catastrophe or atrocity into one day, I think not just, I mean, it's nice to have a memory. It doesn't minimize it, but we have to be able to spread it around. We have to be able to share the stories, and we have to be able to take a little bit of Sophia's story and make it our own, a little bit of Drew's teaching and make it our own. And I think that is the key for us to remember day in and day out, instead of remember one day out of the year or when we're learning about it in history class.
Or just to piggyback on that, Jess, or Black History Month or Genocide Awareness Month, Disability Awareness Month. You know, that's a very dangerous math equation for Westerners, because we are addicted to convenience, right? We want to, so we're responsible, but we really don't have adequate preparation for the work involved. Right, that we're talking about here, and the work involved is really about every day. It's living, breathing, sleeping it, right? And it's not easy, right? I mean, there's a great Buddhist quote that I try to adhere to in teaching quite a bit, which is the difficult will become habitual, the habitual will become easy, the easy will become beautiful. That's a very simple few stanzas, right? But that's a real to get from complete unawareness to beauty is a work. It's not 1/12 of a year, right? So listen, I marched with Black Lives Matter. I'm good, right? I'm good. I don't need to. I've already done my part. Well, no, you haven't. You've done a part. But
Right.
is this what, Vicki, I know you can sleep right on the park in Bidwell, and I know you're there. You're there all the time. You're there to make us aware when we're not even aware, right? And those it's really important to get it into our habit, right? To make that difference between what is habitual and what is natural. What is habitual and what is familiar and what is easy are three of the reasons we're in such big trouble in education. Like the way we educate, the way we do everything, the way we do most things in the structure of Western education is for convenience. And if we were to really, and I think we have this opportunity now, which is inspiring and exciting, to break what wasn't working, to change these
Right.
old structures, right? And to get back to that hard work of shifting a lesson into a life skill. These are not soft skills; these are life skills. I'm adamant when we're training teachers that I way far from my priority is math, reading, and science and social studies. I know that those are important issues.
Sure.
What's most at the forefront of all of our work now is all those socio-emotional learning needs. Our
Right.
kids have been in a cave, right? The one thing that young people need most is to be with each other. Kids don't
Right.
come to school to the math; they go to school to be with each other, right?
Right.
And so, that's where they learn to be with each other. We've taken that for granted. Now that that's taken away, we have to reteach them. We have the opportunity to reteach them what it means to collaborate, what it means to communicate, what it means
Right.
to say, let's not just talk about kindness, let's act in kindness.
Right.
Let's not just talk and throw this word. What does love look like? What, right? And open up the classroom so the students have reclaimed ownership and they can change these old familiar conveniences into inconvenient new habits. I always, and this is the last quote I'll share with you for right now. I'll share a quote from my mother. She was a great teacher. She's alive.
Oh, good.
Still my teacher. She said, great teaching is like great parenting. Really inconvenient. Really inconvenient.
Right.
Like if you go home and say, oh, that was easy, no problem. I'm like,
Right.
is the kids right? What did you really teach? So it's the difference of that parent who just wants to be done, right? Or that teacher who runs to their car at 3:31, right? I think we're in this place of reckoning where we can be inconvenienced because it's so important, because we have access to that emotional barometer of our young people again. And to bring someone like Sophia in and share her story and for her to model this action is so important, because it's so strange. We need Sophia, a Holocaust survivor, to fast track moral lessons for our students.
Sure.
It's
Well,
not but that's really, she condenses all of what I just said into an hour assembly.
Well, and when I'm going to say, Sophia, the way you do, what I'd say is addressing really both the microcosm and the macrocosm, or going from the very individual and the very daily, like we're talking, daily life, our relationships with our the friends, neighbors, classmates, family, of course, and also in our community and then in our world. So on all those different levels at different times and ways, and that's something that you bring in very much. I've heard you do it, that you use both examples that are very personal and ordinary, and then the other things that are also very big and or almost, were they too big to handle? So that and actually we just had a show, we were talking about the nuclear threat, all nuclear arms race, the new nuclear arms race and everything else. Those things that are too big to handle, that our young people and all of us together have to handle before, just for our very, as we were starting off with, for our very existence. So I've seen the way you bring all those different threads in, and it's just so important and so inspiring.
Vicki, can I ask Sophia a question?
Sure, please.
This seemed to surprise you. So
He wants a date.
if I'm finally going to ask her.
No, he's already over there with you. That's not it. Go ahead.
Yeah, my wife knows that Sophia is my best girlfriend. So if I were listening to this show, I'd say, well, that's a lot of good information. There's some smart people talking, and I appreciate that. But I would be wondering, give us an example of the doing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, can you tell?
Oh yeah, because I wanted to interrupt even her, because suddenly I'm thinking what we are talking about, all of us.
Yes.
We have in Buffalo, you don't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
Buffalo is a city who is most welcome to outsiders. And look at the Burmese people who came over here. They rejuvenated the whole west side, and when I came here too, you know, they received me with open arms. We are really the best community when you talk about that.
Sure.
Can you talk about?
And the chicken soup, where does the chicken soup come from?
You know the
I know.
with the farm when you talked about in Europe with the farmers.
Ah, you know, when I talk to kids, you always have to use a few words that absolutely don't relate to your lecture.
Sure.
For example,
Mm-hmm.
Holocaust I talk about, and chicken soup. That is in 2 minutes. I get thank you letters from the students. Teachers say, right, Mrs. Pfeffer, letter. Every letter tells
Oh, wow.
about the chicken soup. And where does the chicken soup come in with an Holocaust? I tell them, you know, you're all young. You all live in a global society. In the old days, you would say our neighbors are the ones, if I live in Williamsville, perhaps my neighbors live in Kenmore at the very most in Rochester, but you live in a global community. So when you see somebody is in trouble, if it is in the United States or Switzerland or Sweden or South Africa, God knows what, go to that person or that community that has all the troubles, and you knock on the doors, even if it be on the other side of the world, you say, hey, I'm come from Buffalo, and I am your global neighbor, and I bring you some chicken soup, because it's a Jewish
Right.
people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, do that, and if you need any help, you know, I will be there. So all the letters I get mention the chicken soup.
That chicken
when they
soup.
alive, when they hear chicken soup, they think about the Holocaust and what they should do.
Campbell should pay her a monthly fee.
Yes, they should. They should. You know, I
get Campbell soup and use it for. And
we're working on their marketing department. Sophia should coat.
It sounds like a plan. Now, I hate to tell you, but we're almost done. So we're really at a time for just final thoughts for now, you know, because it's more to follow in the future. But just for now, just if each of you just to give a quick, you know, final thought. So Sophia, what should we remember?
What we should remember is that we all live in a community. It can be you live in an apartment building, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
We all live in a community, and we have to tolerate one another. And we have to be, you know, we have to work together.
Absolutely.
And so and our children, especially the little ones, they learn that they are being raised. They see that. So when they grow up, you know, they know that they live in a community, and they cannot say, well, I do it my way. I don't care what you do, like the vaccination. You don't have that anymore. We all live in a community. Poor, and middle class, the rich, you all live in a community.
Right. Thank you so much, Sophia, and that we all have to work together. Absolutely. Drew, a final thought. Yeah.
That's not how I was raised, Vicki. Jess should go first.
It's funny because I'm thinking about, it's so hard to kind of find this kernel, right? But to me, I think the most important piece is to really put a mirror to ourselves and tell our own stories and find a way to be a helper, right? I think that action, that practice, that continuous trying again to be better, to do better, to know more, and to help one another is ultimately the best form of love, the best form of remembrance, and the best bet that we have on making a more peaceful world. What about you, Drew?
Absolutely.
I would say that I would pull from Anne Frank, and her quote is on my wall. It was the first theme we had during our first festival,
Right.
and not her most popular, but how wonderful it is that we need not wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. Right. This was a girl in the midst of darkness,
Right.
deep and silence and stillness, and she managed to carve out that beam of light and say, I can't wait to wake up tomorrow and improve the world, right?
Wow.
That's a great comment, right? And there's been a lot of inspiration. Jess has shared some wonderful thoughts. Sophia is always Sophia and sublime and wonderful.
Right.
And of course, you filled with so much wisdom and really appreciate it. But there, if I had to define the task ahead, in order to do the work of reshaping our narrative at the level and at the social level, at the regional level, that's what we're being asked to do right now, right? Every 100 we're being opportunity to go in the cave, right? And it requires courage and discipline. The discipline to stay at it, because it's not always going to be happy and successful, but to stay at it. Courage to stand up and say, I matter every single day. Courage and discipline.
Thank you. Those are wonderful, beautiful thoughts. We can't be more grateful to all three of you for coming on. It's been great to have you. This is Talking Peace, and together we have been talking peace in truth and love. Thank you so much. Thank you all three so very much. That was a great show. Really inspiring.
Thanks for having us, Vic.
What?
Good to be on the same screen as you, Jess. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Likewise. Thanks for the opportunity, Vicki. And Sophia, it's so good to see you.
Thank you. It was a long time.
So great.
Yes.